And today I'm here to talk to you about the story of Kaplan, how we started, and also what we have done throughout the journey for the past 13 years. So for those of you who don't know where Kaplan, or if you haven't heard about Kaplan, we are basically the producer from Taiwan. We started the Taiwanese whiskey industry just like what Suntory did back in 1923. So we started in 2005, and the reason for doing it so late, it was actually purely to do with our system in Taiwan, because we used to have a monopoly system where only our government could produce, import, or sell anything alcoholic. So 2002, when Taiwan officially joined WTO, that was the turning point for Kaplan, because as soon as we joined the WTO, our government was forced to relax the whole regulation. And that's when Mr. Lee, Sr., the owner of the distillery, he was very chuffed, because he waited for almost 40 years to realize his dream. He is 80 years old this year, but he always shared his dream with us that 40 years ago, he wanted to produce whiskey, but due to the system, he was he wasn't able to fulfill his dream. So we, since we started in 2005, our very first drop of our new make was produced in 2006. So basically, Kaplan was up and running in less than 1 year time, including the construction of the distillery and also the installation of all the equipment and so on. So since 2006, 11th of March at precisely 3:30 p.m., that was a very historic moment, not just for Kaplan, but also for Taiwan, because we started the Taiwanese whiskey industry. So we've been producing whiskey, I think similar to Ian Palmer, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And also these days, for the past 6 years, we have been trying very hard to export our whiskey to around the world. So far you can find Kaplan in 68 countries. And every year we receive approximately 1 million people as our visitors coming to see Kaplan. So that's why I think Whisky Magazine was really surprised to hear this. In 2011 and 13, we were visitor attraction of the year, because for the sheer amount of number of people come to see us. But if you come to see us, you know why. Because when you come to see Kaplan, you don't have to pay any tickets to go in. And then by the end of the tour, you can also try our whiskey free of charge. So I think that's why we have 1 million people going. Especially we have plenty of visitors coming from China and also from the surrounding areas. So basically, the story of Kaplan is all about harnessing nature and science. Because when we first started in 2005, we didn't have any previous example or any roadmap to follow. So what Mr. Lee Sr. thought was, since we have the perfect environment in Taiwan, we should be able to make full use of our environment, which is a perfect environment for producing whiskey, especially in terms of maturation. And therefore, we think that by harnessing nature and science, which are the two most important elements when it comes to the production of Kaplan, we think that that's how we managed to create the quality and also all the expressions that we have so far within our portfolio. And the name Kaplan, that's the old name of County Yilan. So we are located in the northeast part of Taiwan, which is here. And this is County Yilan. So apparently 100 years ago, it used to be called Kaplan. And that's why we use the name Kaplan to be the name of our distillery. Mr. Lee, the family, they are also from Kaplan. And I myself, I'm also from County Yilan. So we are all very proud of the name Kaplan, because that represents the County Yilan. And the two words, perseverance and pioneer, these two, they are what Kaplan is all about. So I think these two words also perfect words to describe Kaplan, because when we first started, there was nothing. And then from zero to up and running, with our dedication and our belief in what we can achieve with the environment and with the hard work, we became the pioneer of Taiwanese whiskey industry. So in the future, hopefully, like Jota-san said, if you come to Japan in the future, we are only 2 hours flight away from Japan, so you can also come and see us. And when you come, if you come directly from the UK, from Heathrow to our airport of Taoyuan County is 15 hours. And then from the airport to our distillery is only 1.5 hours. So in less than 24 hours time, you'll be able to come to see us at Kavalan Distillery. And if I'm there, if I'm not traveling, I would love to show you the distillery myself. So nature, this is actually a picture taken in County Yilan, in the surrounding area of the distillery. So once again, because Taiwan is the Tropic of Cancer goes through Taiwan, so therefore we are in the subtropic, and with the subtropic climate, we have very heavy rainfall each year. Just for your information, for the whole Taiwan, over 188 days, we have 2,100 millimeters of rainfall. But in County Yilan, that's for the same period, that's 2,680 millimeters. Therefore, we have plenty of water in Taiwan. And this also explains why we can produce our whiskey every day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. And also the picture you see here, this is actually taken by my assistant Yvonne, also behind the distillery. This is one of the small streams in the mountains where we get our water source from. So, Tropic of Cancer, and also because of the location, geographical location of Taiwan, it's full of volcanoes and also earthquakes, and therefore, because of this, similar to Japan, we have plenty of mountains, and that's why Kavalan is actually surrounded. The distillery is surrounded by mountains, and those are the places where we get our water source from. And speaking of earthquakes, I know I shouldn't be joking about this because I think recently in Japan you had quite a serious earthquake. But when it comes to the maturation of Kavalan, when our spirit is stored in the cask, undergoing maturation process, due to the earthquake, our whiskey, right from the beginning, is like Bond's martini. It's shaken and not stirred. So that's sometimes we joke about the earthquake. So because of volcanoes, if you like hot spring, which I think is very popular in Japan, which is also very good for your skin conditions, especially for the ladies. If you come to see us in the future, you can also enjoy the hot spring, and that has very certain contents of minerals inside, which is very good for your skin conditions. And this is the island that is off the coast of County Yilan, which is what we call the Turtle Island because of its shape. This is actually an active volcano right outside of County Yilan. So with all these adding together with the mountains, we have the highest concentration of tall mountains in Taiwan, with more than 300 peaks, and also in particular with the Snowy Mountain, which is right next to the distillery, which is quite tall, quite high, 3,880 meters tall. So I think for your information, Mount Fuji is 3,700. So that's why we also have some snow. We also have some snow on top. But the shape is not as good as Jota-san's shape, which is the peak. But it's more complicated. Yeah. So because of all these adding together, this is why we have so much water in Kavalan, in County Yilan. And also when it comes to water, not only that it is very pure, but also it is very cold. Because Kavalan tries to be a very green distillery as well. As you know, when it comes to the production of whiskey, especially during distillation process, you need plenty of water to be the coolant, to condensate the alcoholic vapor into liquid state. And because of our natural water, spring water coming from Snow Mountain, which is the melting water of the snow, it is very cold. Therefore, we don't have to refrigerate the water too low so that we can use it straight away to be the coolant. And therefore, we can save a lot of energy when it comes to the condensation part of the process. And also, because of the volcanic nature of the island, especially in County Yilan, when it comes to water, there are certain kind of minerals in our water, and these are all very good for fermentation. Yesterday we talked about fermentation, and during fermentation, if you want to have good quality of fermentation, you need to have certain nutrients for the yeast to eat, to take on, and then to have energy to do the conversion of sugars into alcohol and congeners. I'm sure Georgie knows about this. It's all part of IBD course. So because of that, that's why we think that during the fermentation process of Kaolan, by the end of fermentation, the reason why our wash is always so fruity and also so complex, full of fruitiness, floralness, and so on. We thank our water for that as well. It's part of the reasons. So, in summarize, I think subtropics, heavy rainfall, and volcanoes, these are all our characteristics of our brand. So, when you have the nature, when you have the science, you need the people to bridge the gap. So that's when it comes to the people of Kaolan. And the gentleman on the left-hand side here, this is Mr. T.T. Lee. He is Mr. Y.T. Lee's father. He's our chairman. So it was always his dream to have a distillery to represent Taiwan. So in 2002, we talked about that already just now, because of his belief in hard work and determination, despite the fact that even his own friends and relatives told him at that time not to do whiskey production. But because he knows that with everything we have in County Yilan, and then plus the science, we should be able to do it. But of course, not to mention that there was a very important person, I think together with Dan and also with many other producers here, with Bennett and also Mr. Thompson from Yorkshire Whisky Distillery. We all have something in common, and that is through the guidance of Dr. James Wan. He was a very good scientist who was very knowledgeable about whiskey, especially in terms of wood management and also chemical analysis. And that's why, because of his guidance, we managed to overcome many obstacles during our journey for the past 13 years. So sometimes when I think about him, I get really emotional. And he reminds me of a movie that I used to watch time and time again when I was a young man, The Karate Kid. Sometimes I feel like because through his guidance, we conquer the world. So, and as Ian once again said all the time yesterday, that consistency and also balance is what whiskey is all about. So this is what I do every morning when I practice my balance and also consistency. So someone that I will always remember for the rest of my life. So when it comes to science, since we don't have any previous example to follow, so what we had to do was to make sure that our quality meets the standard. And in order to do that, we think that by digitalizing our distillery in terms of chemical analysis and also by automation, which I think I disagree with Nick this morning, because I think Nick believes in manual production. But we think that by using state-of-the-art equipment, especially during the production of new make, that's when consistency is all about. So by using state-of-the-art equipment, and also with Jim Swan's guidance, we try to make sure that our fermentation and also our distillation is always right for each and every batch. So this is what we mean by digitalizing the distillery. But what we don't digitalize is the maturation part, which we think that we should leave it to nature. And this picture here is to show you that within Kaplan, we also have, not only we have in-house cooperage, but we also have in-house chemical analysis room department, which is, I think, very similar to Pernod Ricard. I met a gentleman whose name is Rob Fotheringham. So he was the head of chemist, and we talked about, you know, the chemical analysis of whiskeys. And to be honest, sometimes I think that the reason why Jim Swan took on the challenge 13 years ago was not because he wanted to try and also challenge the hot climate, but also he knows that the willingness of our chairman, his willingness to invest in terms of science, that is something that I think one of the reasons why Jim Swan joined us. Because this machine here, this is our latest state-of-the-art GC QTOF and also our LC QTOF. So these are all the equipments that we, you know, make sure that after distillation, if we have the right content of all these chemicals, some are responsible for flavors, some are responsible for mouthfeel and so on. And then we do something like Jota-san explained yesterday by doing PCA and also MPP and so on. All these are all to do with statistical, analytical results for us to make sure that we have the correct quality of our new make to begin with. Because, but one thing I should emphasize is that, of course, you cannot rely purely on machines, because being a blender, we know that when it comes to flavor, it is the human nose that you have to use to make sure that you have the right quality. And also, after all, not every consumer will have a GC and LC at home to analyze the quality of the whiskey. So nosing is very important. But you know, these equipments, they are very important as well to guide us, to aid us when it comes to the decision of the quality of our whiskey. So harnessing the heat is something that I always talk about when I do my master classes or tastings throughout the world. Basically, if you come to see us in the future, or if you look at the picture here, right now we have 2 maturation warehouses. And these 2 maturation warehouses are very unique in terms of its structure because of the 5-story warehouse. In summertime, when the outside temperature is very warm, 36 degrees Celsius, the inside can be really hot, especially on the top floor here. In summer, normally between May and October, if you come and see us, the top floor can be as hot as 42 degrees Celsius, which is apparently desert temperature in the Middle East. So with that kind of high temperature, that is very good for extraction process. What do I mean by extraction? Basically, that's where the color of the whiskey takes place, and also with all these wood-related compounds going into the spirit from the wood, they all take place during the very hot summer period. But once again, whiskey with only color is no good, because you also want your flavors, your fragrant congeners, a rich bouquet of nuances for consumers to enjoy. But we are very lucky that even though we are located in the subtropic, but in winter times, which means between November and March of next year, we have cold airs from Siberia, and that goes through Japan, Korea, and then comes to Taiwan, which will bring the temperature down to -10 up in the snow mountains. But on the ground, sea level where we are located, the temperature can be as low as 7 degrees Celsius. And that is the time when oxidation takes place. So with our extraction and oxidation, and then plus evaporation, which are the 3 main reactions during maturation, you can see that this is the reason why Kaplan whiskey is all about complexity and also richness in terms of viscosity. Because when consumers ask me what's the main difference between Kaplan and perhaps with any other whiskeys around the world, I would say that I think complexity and also viscosity is something that we think which is very unique to Kaplan. Because when we offer you to drink our whiskey, what we try to do, as our slogan in Taiwan always say, we try to offer you the richness of life to the fullest, so that you can experience all these different congeners, whether you nose it or whether you drink it on a pallet, they will all give you a brand new experience. So maturation redefined, this is something that we always try to tell to our consumers. What we try to say to you is that at Kaplan, because of our unique climate and also our unique geographical location and all these volcanoes and natural environment, we have to mature our whiskey. It's just that it doesn't have to be a long, long time. So during the process of our maturation, with all these heat and oxidation, evaporation taking place, our whiskey can be quite mature in a short period of time. But what we have to make sure is that we don't have too much angel share, which we are having around 10% at the moment. So for the future, I think in order to continue with our maturation, what we have to do is to make sure that we reduce the angel share to an acceptable level so that we can also reduce the cost when it comes to the production of Kaplan. So conclusion, nature and science, I think these two are the most fundamental parts, or I should say ingredients when it comes to the making of Kaplan. And also, I think Kaplan, we show to consumers in the world that we turn the so-called impossible to possible by making whiskey in the growing world, where I think normally consumers will never think could produce whiskey, by harnessing the heat. And for the future, since the theme of the forum is 2020, I think what we would do for the future is to keep growing and also keep innovating with what we can do with the quality and also with the expressions of our whiskey. So, looking at the two maps of Scotland, Speyside, and Yilan, Taiwan, personally, I think that in the future, County Yilan will be similar to Speyside because apparently Speyside has the highest concentration of number of distilleries in Scotland. I'm sure in the future, with our example, we will have more and more whiskey distilleries in Taiwan. And I'm sure County Yilan is the perfect place if there are more producers who want to produce whiskey in Taiwan. Just to give you one example, Kaplan started in 2006, and about 4 years later, our own government started the distillation as well. So now we have 2 whiskey distilleries. And apparently, I was told that there's a rumor another company is in preparation of setting up their own distillery as well. So in the future, the 3rd one, and then the 4th one, 5th one will all follow soon. So this is something that we are very happy to see for the future, just like in Japan and in many other countries. So once again, if you have time and opportunity of coming to our part of the world, please come and see us. These are all the pictures of the surrounding area. So we welcome you to come and see us in Taiwan. Actually, I think Kaplan is not just a whiskey. Kaplan is an experience of, if you come to see us in Taiwan, hopefully not only you can see how we produce our whiskey, but also appreciate the culture, the food, and also the history, the geographical location, and so on as the whole package. This is something that we try to promote for Kaplan for the future. So before we end, we would like to thank Cotswolds Distillery and also Zoe for the very hard work contacting everyone, arranging everyone. You know, I can't imagine if we are to organize this event in Taiwan, how busy it would be. So really appreciate whatever happens. And also for Box Distillery, or Cotton Distillery as they describe, Yang for the invitation and also for Yinhua's invitation as well. So, and also I thank everyone here in the audience for coming to see, to the forum here today. And I'm really lucky, I feel really lucky and honored to be able to come here and speak to you. So I'm more than happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
The Whisky Kid works. Thank you for that. Excellent stuff, as I knew it would be. Ian, kind of picking up on something we were chatting about this morning with Nick about the idea of place. Your presentation really seemed to be saying these are our conditions, so we have to work with them and not against them. Would that be a fair?
Yes, that's right. So basically, what Mr. Lee thought was, since the heat is something that is there all the time because of our geographical location, that is something that we cannot change. So instead of fighting it, we think that we should harness it and make it work for us. So the heat of Taiwan is one perfect example because it became our advantage when it comes to maturation, especially in terms of extraction process.
I think, and maybe one of the things, when people sort of hear and talk to you about the whiskies and they're relatively young compared to Scotch, etc., and they're rapidly maturing.
Yes.
From a technical point of view, from a blending point of view, how do you achieve balance and complexity within something where the maturation process is so rapid? So it's not just woody, there's actually more things happening underneath. Yes. What's your thing? How do you go about that?
Okay, so what we do at Kaplan is that we have one new make, but by using all these different casks, we managed to create completely different characters of single malt whiskies by the end of maturation. So that is to do with variety, flavors. But when it comes to balance, and also when it comes to making our whiskey to have that old whiskey type of aroma or taste on the palate. To be honest, last month when I came to the UK, I think it was in Birmingham for a tour of tasting, and one of the bartenders asked me one question. He said that because of Kaplan's short time of maturation, maybe we wouldn't have certain elements that is maybe to do with the interaction between the wood and the spirit, or when it comes to the extraction process because of the short maturation period. But that is actually a very wrong concept and also a way of thinking, because together with Dr. Jim Swan, we have discovered by using our state-of-the-art GCMS, LC, and also GCQ TOF and so on, we have found out that with our low temperature oxidation in wintertime, we actually managed to have all these certain, I should say, chemical compounds formed within our whiskey, in the wood, in the cask. So that is why Kaplan can achieve that maturity in a short time. So by blending all these different casks and also by having these so-called tertiary reaction compounds, that is how we make sure our whiskey tastes mature at a young age. But when I say young age, it depends, it is a relative term, because for bourbon cask, due to the smaller size of 200 liters, if you compare that to, say, wine barriques of 300, and also with sherry butts, 500 liter, they all mature differently. So what we have to do is to find similar to what Jonathan said yesterday, the peak of maturation. And that is actually my job when I'm not traveling, which is very hard these days. Because every time when I go back home, our people in the warehouse, we have a team of coopers. Not only they repair cask or maintain our cask, they also have to draw samples for me. So when I go back home, what I do is I try to know as many cask samples as possible, so that I can determine which ones are the mature ones, and which ones are still immature and need some time to go. But with our high heat of summer, once again, normally when I see something that is not mature in terms of color, I would tell our warehouse people to leave the cask for one more summer. So that's the time when the high heat of 42 degrees Celsius will give the extraction in the cask.
It's a fascinating situation. Almost like two different types of maturation going on.
Yes, that's right.
Extraction and oxidation, completely separate ways. Fascinating. Questions? Anybody? Tris? Well, then I'll come to you. Okay.
Hey. I'm really interested in the kind of science and technology side of it. And you mentioned that, well, it sounds like machines are doing a lot of the work for you up to the new make point.
Yes, that's right.
So my question is, do you foresee a time in the future where, and this might not be Cavan, but I'm talking about the whiskey industry in general, where a distillery can function without the human interaction element fully from start to finish. So it would control maturation, given enough data and enough linked machines that could effectively create a finished whiskey over a period of time. Do you see that happening in the future, ever?
I hope not. Because I have 2 kids to feed. No. Once again, I think you can do everything with automation up to the production of new made. I think that's up to that point. That is where automation can be employed full time. But after that, when it comes to maturation, the selection of the wood to determine when the content is mature, and also the mouthfeel, the aroma, the rich bouquet of lumos. All these, I think you really have to rely on human sensory.
Do you not think machines could measure that stuff at some point in the future, if not already?
Right.
And therefore tune whiskey to end up in the correct parameters?
Yes. Recently, on the way here, I was watching CSI on Netflix. And in CSI, you have so-called electronic nose, because when they want to take samples of the odors in murder scene, you can use the electronic nose to take samples of all these different flavors in terms of chemical compounds. But once again, at the end of the day, how the compound smells like, it really depends on humans' sensory analysis. So I think Jota-san has been in the industry for a long, long time. I'm sure he's more experienced than me. So I'm sure when he knows something, he will know that if this cask is mature or if it's over matured and so on. So I think it's like automation, full autonomy driving. I think that day, to go to that day, I think maybe another 100 years before we can do that. And when it comes to whiskey, I think in order to do everything automated, even longer, I think.
We may have the corpse, but we need a detective. Maybe. Yeah.
You mentioned that you'd like to reduce the evaporation rate from 10%.
That's right.
So I wondered, what figure have you got in mind, and does the finance department agree with your figure, or they prefer it to be even lower? How will you reduce the evaporation rate, and what influence will that have potentially on the resulting whiskey?
3 questions.
Ian always has 3 questions. Okay, so as you know, or might not know, for the past 2 years, we went through what we call the expansion program in terms of production capacity. Therefore, when it comes to NGO share, the reduction of NGO share, I'm under even much more pressure from Mr. Lee, both junior and senior, to reduce the NGO share, because that is the same as cash evaporating into thin air. So with our present capacity, which is quite big, if we can reduce our NGO share from 10%, my target at the moment for the next 5 years is to make sure that we can reduce it down to perhaps 8%, around 8%. If we can do that, that should be very good to begin with. And then, from there, we will try our best to reduce it even further. But when it comes to reduction of NGO share, one thing that you have to take into consideration is that if you slow down the maturation, if you lower the temperature during your maturation, that should lower the NGO share. But at the same time, the time of maturation will be longer. So it's all about finding what we call the optimum point for both NGO share and the speed of maturation. But how we do that, that's a classified secret. Something that Jim Swan and I researched before he unfortunately passed away last year. So in 2 years' time, once again, in 2020, I should be able to let you know if we have achieved it or not. But fingers crossed.
We look forward to that.
Yes.
One last question. Okay, here we go.
Thank you. Just a related question with your 10% losses at the moment.
Yes.
Is that mostly water rather than alcohol? So is the ABV increasing in the cask? And if the answer is yes, why?
Okay. The answer is no. We lose more alcohol than water. So that's why at Kaplan, after maturation, our strength always go down. But very rarely, you do see some individual casks within certain spots of the warehouse where the strength goes up, similar to, I think, what happens in Kentucky or Missouri, because in certain spot within our warehouse, maybe that space is drier, so we lose more water than alcohol. But normally we lose more alcohol than water. The general trend is going downward.
With a drier atmosphere, you're losing more alcohol.
No, with wet. Because Kaplan is subtropical. Our humidity throughout the year is around 90%. It's very humid. So with that kind of humidity, you lose more alcohol than water. Yeah. Thank you.
Just kind of picking up on that, just finally, Colin was talking earlier about the possibility of different regional styles beginning to emerge in America, desert whiskies, etc. Do you see a subtropical? I mean, you were talking about Speyside and
Yes, that's right.
Parallels, but do you see a subtropical style of whiskey coming in? Because you're really pioneering, that kind of whiskey. Do you see that beginning to be a force within whiskey in the future?
So when I showed the two maps of Speyside in Scotland and also Yilan in Taiwan, basically, once again, with Jim Swan's and I's research, we have found out that the temperature difference, I should say temperature profile to begin with. Temperature profile of Speyside and Yilan is actually quite similar, except that we are 10 to 15 degrees Celsius higher. So it is parallel like this. So with this kind of profile of our temperature, our whiskey will tend to be more viscous because during maturation, higher angel share due to the heat. Heat is the main reason for our higher angel share. So that is like concentrating the content in the cask. And that's why our whiskey has that more oily viscosity.
Are you worried? Sorry, I keep asking questions, but are you worried? Starting off saying you're working with conditions, but you're wanting to reduce the angel share, and that condition is giving you that viscous, oily palate texture. Are you worried that you're going to lose that when you try and reduce angel share for economic reasons?
Right. No. What we are doing right now as our angel share reduction operation is
Let's get the answer out.
It's something that is very natural. It's not chemical and it's not physical either. So it is something that we think can reduce the angel share, but at the same time allow the evaporation to a certain degree, 8%, and also oxidation and extraction process all taking place. So we won't alter the characteristic of our present whiskey, but just the angel share being reduced.
Well, we look forward to finding out the secret in 2020. Until then, please say thank you to you.